Well, from reports, MS-13 comprises about 1% of the total gangs in the U.S. But the Republicans kind of took it upon themselves to really use MS-13 as a tool to try to change laws that they wanted to change.
Right.
So, Republicans started to accuse Democrats of being responsible for the violence of MS-13, and started asking for stricter immigration policies because of MS-13.
Right, right.
They started to argue the sanctuary cities, which is places that don't deport people, was contributing to MS-13 activity.
Right.
Although, they did studies on this, and there's actually no relation to the two. In fact, in sanctuary cities, there's actually less crime that they found. But it started to go with this whole narrative that Trump started to pick up and run when he was actually trying to get elected. And then once he became president, MS-13 became a top priority of the Justice Department.
Mm-hmm.
Did you feel that when that started to happen?
Well, I remember seeing it and me, shaking my head. I was all like, I can't believe that this is happening over. It's history is starting to repeat itself, because that's the same stuff that I saw on TV when the MS-13 gang started to die out in Los Angeles, and then the war on gangs started, and then now it was being put on a pedestal, if you will. So it's kind of history repeating itself, and not only are you using that image of MS-13, but like you say, it's being portrayed to go ahead and say, this is how all the immigrants look. This is how everybody from El Salvador looks. If we go ahead and don't stop, or we don't build the wall, all of these people are going to come, and they make it feel like they're going to be in your backyard or right next to you. So absolutely, like I said, it's been a tool to use immigrants, people of color, as a scapegoat. But this time they were, they took it to a whole different level and say, you know what, we're just going to go ahead and paint this face as well and say this is the immigrant face, if you will. And then we put the MS-13 tattoos, which was an actual person, right?
Yeah. I mean, in the process, you started seeing some very kind of disturbing things. So Trump's organization started using this MS-13 reason to start locking up kids.
Mm.
There was an interesting documentary that I watched on PBS. There was a kid named Junior, who was in New York and in Long Island.
Right.
Someone accused him of being an MS-13 member.
Right.
When they went through the investigation, they found that he had written 503, which is the El Salvador area code, in his notebook one time.
Mm.
He got suspended, and they told him, look, just sign this little paper saying you're MS-13 and you can come back to school next year.
Right.
These are all undocumented immigrants.
Right.
So no one really wants to go to the police. No one really wants to have the law involved. They just want to quietly live in the U.S. and not get deported.
Right.
So with this teenage kid here, he signed the paper, and before you know it, he got sent off to a detention center for 6 months.
Right.
By himself. He tried to kill himself, tried to hang himself.
Right.
So then they stripped him of all his clothes and made him just basically sit naked in his cell. Then he found some glass and tried to cut his arm to bleed to death.
Right.
The ACLU came and filed a lawsuit on his behalf. And one of the California judges actually sided against Trump. And then they started reviewing all the charges. 26 kids had their charges dropped, and his charges got dropped. But this is somebody who was just a good church-going kid,
Right.
who got hemmed up in the system, and this started happening over and over again, where kids were getting separated from their families and getting thrown into this pile
Right.
of gang members, of dangerous people,
Right.
in order for Trump to actually get rid of what he felt was undesirables in this country. Right. What's your take on that?
Well,
And have you heard stories like this?
I have, and I remember reading about that story as well. Kids from Central America being, let's say those kids in that school, it was obviously kids that also had that culture clash right there, and the people that they could relate to were the Salvadoran kids. Sometimes we have culture clashes between the Mexican kids had over here, the Salvadoran kids had over here, the African Americans over here, the Chicano kids right here. So this kid automatically flocked, if you will, to the Salvadorian kids. And unfortunately, there was MS influence right there. And now when you hear kids now saying that I'm from MS, I don't jump to the conclusion that it's this machete-wielding MS-13 member that's just going to go ahead and hack you away. A lot of times it's these kids wanting to get that clout, if you will, within the school to probably look good to a girl or to go look to their peers and say, oh, yeah, by the way, I'm from MS-13 also. And these other kids will go, then they get that sense of belonging, that sense of acceptance. Now they're part of a group where they feel that they go ahead and belong. And then with this stuff, this kid told a school teacher, if you will, hey, I'm from MS and I'm from MS-13. And that's how that went ahead and happened. But I've seen a lot of stories where even when I go do intervention with a kid that's saying that they're from MS, a lot of times I go down to the point of it where I, talk to them and I say, so in reality, you're not from MS, right? And a lot of time, no, mister, it's just that it sounds cool and and I'm tired of being bullied at school also. I want to be a part of something. So if I'm safe, I'm from this gang, I'll go ahead and do it. If I put on my Facebook page and portray this image of myself, people will probably go ahead and leave me alone. And these kids don't understand that, unfortunately, if you go ahead and throw up an MS sign, if you go ahead and start faking the little kid that cried wolf, if you will, the feds are going to go ahead and take advantage of that or take it serious to a certain extent. And you're going to end up being in custody of the same thing that happened to Junior. And then Junior was an informant, right? He gave up the are we talking about the same kid that
I'm not sure.
Okay, because there was also another kid that started working with the FBI, if you will, and he started giving intel, and he thought he was gonna get that Ray Liotta deal, if you will, from like the Goodfellas, where you put up and all this, so you're gonna get trust in the boat. But after they got all the information from him, they turned him over to INS, and then he was facing deportation. And recently, I believe that he was deported back to El Salvador. So where is the way out? You give information, you get turned over to INS because you weren't born here, and you still get deported. And right there in El Salvador, then you're probably going to go ahead and get killed. And a lot of times, not necessarily. Perhaps from MS for you being an informant, but then you have these elimination squads that if you have any type of MS on your jacket or MS tattoo, if you're from it or not, they're gonna go ahead and kill you as well, if you will. It's like a kid that goes ahead and gets out of MS, right? And he's not from El Salvador. Let's say you get out and everything, but then INS still doesn't care and comes to get your ICE, and you end up getting deported as well.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen some of the documentaries about MS-13 guys in other countries that, the guys that have their face tatted up, they're such a target to the police.
Right.
They literally don't leave their house for years.
Yeah.
They sit in their house and run their operations. They send their guys out to do whatever, but they literally cannot leave the house because as soon as they walk outside, the police or the hit squads will come in and just either kill them or put them in prison forever.
Yeah, and what's happening right now in El Salvador with the current administration right there, it consists of the same oppression of saying, okay, we're going to go ahead and kill off these gang members. And before you go into the neighborhood and you arrest or you kill the gang member, and then, your military group leaves. Now what they're doing, you kill or arrest the gang member and the military groups stay. So now what they're doing, these guys from MS, they're being pushed out into the mountains, if you will.
Yeah.
So now you're totally away from civilization, if you will, and you're on survival mode. Yeah. And if you're on survival mode and you're right there seeing how you're going to go ahead and survive, your mentality from over there to over here, if all you're thinking about is violence, then it's going to be, without getting any type of mental health for that, it's going to be pretty bad, if you will.
Well, Trump, when speaking about MS-13, he said, these aren't people, they're animals. Mm-hmm. This is talking about people like yourself, like your friends, like your family members. He's calling them animals. How does that type of verbiage really affect a whole group of people?
Yeah. Well, being a former MS member, I believe that we're all human beings, right?
Yeah.
When you go into the history of times and times, the stuff that governments or regime or whatever has even done to indigenous people, of the killing of millions of people, right? Not just Native Americans, but even when you go into the Holocaust, if you will, that's animalistic behavior, if you will, as well. But it's, again, portraying the image and giving somebody a label, if you will, right? So it went from the gangster, where we label the gangster a thug, right, and say this is the thug, this is the criminal, this is the good for nothing. Now we're gonna go ahead and put the face of the immigrant, and not necessarily they were probably talking about MS-13, not just right there, but it was a low key thing to say the immigrant is the animal. They want to go ahead and
Right.
take it to a whole different extent. But going to that, I believe that nobody is an animal. I believe that people are human beings.
It's a lot easier to put an animal in a cage than a human. So you consider someone an animal, you have less qualms to put them in a cage, to put them out of their misery, however you want to do it, because these aren't really people, right? They're just animals.
Right. That makes
We kill animals every day for whatever reason.
Right. Perfect. Yeah, perfect example right there.